Hello and welcome back to the Wildlife Garden Project. Today we're going to be planting this apple tree, but before we get onto that, let's have a bit of an update on some of the things that we looked at last time. I'm going to take you through a few updates of some of the things that we looked at last week. First of all is the little mini pond we've got here. I've now filled it with water and added some plants into it as well. Let's take a closer look at those plants. So I've placed 3 plants into this little pond here. The first one, which we'll zoom in on, this is called Water Soldier. This kind of floats on the surface with some of the leaves poking through the top. And it will actually sort of sink down to the bottom in the winter. I'm not sure how it's going to fare in this kind of tiny pond, but it kind of overwinters as buds, dormant buds at the bottom of the ponds in colder weathers. But when it's warmer, it floats up to the surface and pokes out at the top. So that's kind of a nice one. It's also a kind of a native plant to this area. Actually grows quite a lot in the Norfolk Broads, which is sort of a canal and river system all through sort of Norfolk, which is where I live. And so that's a really good plant to have in there. I think I'm quite excited to get that one. Next up, if we zoom over to the corner here, not sure how well you can see this through the water. I'll try and get the shadows in the right place. That's hornwort, and that is, again, it's kind of native to all. It's found all over the world, really, I think, but it's kind of native to Europe, and it is found in this country in the UK. So that's a nice one to have. It's a good oxygenator. I've just kind of placed that in the corner. Again, I'm not really too sure how well you can see that through the water, but hopefully you can see that okay. And the third one I placed in here, I'm not too sure what's happened to this one. This is curled pondweed. Now I put it in as a bunch, but it seems to have been destroyed overnight. I put these plants in yesterday, and they seem to have been a bit destroyed. You can kind of see there's kind of bits floating around over here, so I'm not entirely sure what's happened. Maybe a bird kind of used this to bathe in this morning or something and kind of tore it up a little bit, but let me just zoom out a little bit. But it's kind of been, I don't know, it's been pulled out. There is some roots, or kind of, it's a plant, it's kind of weighted down, so it's gone down to the bottom down there, and that seems to be okay, but a lot of this has kind of been pulled out of it, so I'm not sure how well that one's going to do. But again, it's a good oxygenator, and it's a nice plant to have in there. So that's really all I needed. This one's kind of free floating at the moment. There are roots. Hopefully it will kind of find some purchase and it'll kind of stay where I want it to, in that corner there. But anyway, that's the update on the pond. There's a bit of a dirty film on the tops here. Maybe I'll try and sort of clean that somehow. Kind of from the dust, probably from the stones, it's kind of floated to the surface. So hopefully I can try and do something about that. And but anyway, that's coming on. Now what we really need to do is just wait for the creatures to turn up, and hopefully we'll get something living in there. Just a quick update on the pond. It's been a few days later since you saw that last clip, and you can see here that the pond has gone kind of pea soup. It's completely green, been completely overtaken by algae. Now this is perfectly normal. Algae is a much smaller organism and can actually photosynthesize quicker than some of the bigger plants, and they are quicker to get to the nutrients and that sort of thing. So that they will overtake the pond for a few days, maybe a week or so. I don't know exactly, but hopefully before too long it should die down once all the nutrients have kind of been taken from the water, and that should die back, and the other plants will then start taking over. One way we could combat this is by adding more plants into the pond, so maybe I'll get around to doing that at some point this week, and that they can kind of take the nutrients away from the algae, and hopefully that will clear the water up a little bit. But we'll see how that goes. We'll keep an eye on it. So one thing I want to briefly talk about before we get started on today's work is grass. Now you can see the bit I'm sitting in at the moment is freshly mowed a few days ago. It's quite short, but right next to me here, this half of the garden is very long. I haven't mowed this grass since last summer sometime, and that's a big part of the wildlife garden here, is to let this grass grow wild, and hopefully we'll see some wonderful things growing in there. Now the problem is the lawn grass is very thick and overpowering, and if we want wildflowers to take over, then we do need to do something about it. Wildflowers will struggle to get a purchase because grass will overtake and is very overpowering. Will just kind of grow and choke out everything. So we need to kind of thin it out a little bit, but that's something that we'll be doing much later in the year, in the autumn, when hopefully we can get some yellow rattle plants, which is a parasitic plant on grass, and it will actually sort of thin out the grass a little bit. But that's for sort of autumn time for next year. For now, we're leaving it to grow and just kind of seeing what's going to happen. Now there are benefits to having short grass in the wildlife garden. So this area obviously is for the family to use. It's kind of an area where we can actually go out and walk about on the grass without having to fight our way through the long grass here. but there are species of bee and beetles and various insects that will be able to live in shortgrass or bare patches of earth, and they will actually burrow under the ground and lay eggs under there and stuff. So there are wildlife that you can find in shortgrass. But let's go and have a look at the nettles, and then we'll get on to today's work. So you can actually see one of my favourite places in the garden to go and look by this sort of pathway that I've trampled down in the long grass to go and look at a patch of nettles. Let's take a closer look. So on this nettle leaf right here we have some bright yellow eggs. I was really excited to see these. My first thoughts were there was a butterfly eggs, and if we saw last episode we saw the small tortoiseshell butterfly flying around the nettles, and they are one of the caterpillars that feed on nettles. So my first thought was, oh, maybe it's a tortoiseshell. But I looked up some of the pictures for that egg, and it doesn't look anything like this. The only butterfly thing that I found that looked anything like this was a cabbage white, and I couldn't find anything about those eating nettles. They obviously eat cabbages and plants similar to that, so I was a little bit confused by that. But then if you follow me on Twitter, which you can do if you follow the link in the description, I did post out a picture of these and asked if anybody knew what they were, and somebody replied back saying, actually no, they look like ladybird eggs. And so I looked up ladybird eggs, and yes, they do. That's probably exactly what they are. So I'm really excited to see that, because ladybirds are going to be a fascinating thing to watch. They go through complete metamorphosis, so the nymphs of these things are completely different from the adults. It'll be really exciting to show those off to you. You may have remembered me talking about the aphid mummies. This is the aphids that have been impregnated with an egg from a parasitic wasp, and the larva of the parasitic wasp hatches out on the inside of the aphid, which then eats it from the inside and then bursts out of the body. You can see this one here has actually got a hole in it, so we can see that the wasp has hatched out from this one. All the other ones I can't see any kind of indication. If I just actually come up this way, there's another one on this leaf here. This one here looks to be pretty intact, so the egg inside is still incubating as far as I can tell. But that one down there, there is a kind of a hole in the back, which you may or may not be able to see. So it looks like something has hatched out of that one. So absolutely fascinating. Okay, so I've marked out an area. I've removed a patch of turf where the tree is going to go. And now all I need to do is dig a hole. So let's get to that. Before we dig the hole, let me show you this grub I found in the soil while removing the grass. This is the larva of a chafer beetle, probably the garden chafer, although I can't be certain as there are several species of chafers. These grubs live in the soil and feed on the roots of plants like grass. They can cause quite a bit of damage to plants and lawns, and more damage can be caused by birds, hedgehogs, foxes and badgers as they dig up your lawn looking for the grubs to eat. As such, they are often an unwelcome addition to gardens, but here in the wildlife garden all creatures are welcome, so let's pop this little guy back into the soil, but away from where I'm about to dig that hole. Interestingly, the larva can live for 2 to 3 years before burrowing deeper into the soil around April to become a chrysalis. They will hatch out as adults in May and live for around 8 weeks. As it's now nearing the end of May, this grub has at least another year to go. Okay, let's get that hole dug. Now that the tree is planted, I have a bare patch of soil surrounding it. This will be perfect for planting a few more wildflower seeds. Now it is getting a bit late in the year for planting from seed, but hopefully we will see some results in a few weeks' time. If not, hopefully I'll see some results next spring. As I've said before, a wildlife garden is a long-term project, and we won't see its full potential for several years. The first packet of seeds I'm planting are forget-me-nots, followed by a mix of wildflower seeds like oxeye daisies, cornflower, cowslips and more. Finally, I give them a thorough watering. Well, I think that's been a pretty successful day. I hope you'll come back next time. There's loads more to do still in the garden, so I'm really looking forward to getting stuck into it. And I'll see you next time. Goodbye.